Welcome to a video on the new TOK exhibition, which is the new assessment instrument for the new TOK guide for First Examinations 2022. The new instrument is replacing the presentation, and there's some cool new changes, and so I'd just like to take you through those and help you to understand them. So it's a new IA task, and the moderation for this is going to be almost the same as for your normal subject IA, so everyone's going to understand that a little bit better. There'll be a sample that goes away. And the other thing that's really important to notice is that the new exhibition is focused on how TOK manifests itself in the real world. So this is the real focus of this, and hopefully tries to help you understand that TOK does have really strong connections with your life and with the things that are going on around about you. I have some pictures on the front page here. One is actually an example from the IB about a coffee cup with patterns on it. And these are examples of objects. Some of these are good and some of these are bad maybe, but I just wanted to show you a variety of what can be the objects around us in the world. Maybe these beakers aren't really great because they're a bit generic, and we might need to actually take a photo of a beaker that you have used in science. The other thing I want to just point out is it's still very, very early days, and we haven't even started doing this exhibition yet, and you'll be the first students in my classes to do it. And so it's really important that we understand that we might need to make this video again after we've been through this whole process for one time, and we've seen what the moderators give back to us in terms of feedback. So the exhibition starts with this idea of objects, and we'll talk about prompts, etc. in a minute. But you are to select a prompt from the list that is in the guide, and then you are to curate this exhibition of 3 objects. And they must be connected to this prompt. So we sort of need to talk about the prompts and the objects all at once. In any case, you've got to select 3 objects, and they are able to be from a wide variety of things. Many different things are suitable, but you're encouraged to select the objects that are personal to you and that are relevant, and that link very clearly to the prompt. That's a very important part. So the breadth of these objects, it can range from being a tweet, etc., that you might find interesting or controversial or impactful in some way, because it must have a specific real world connection. So you need to demonstrate how that there has been an impact from that tweet, etc. You can't just talk about tweets in general because that's too generic. So you can't have a photo of a baby that you've Googled. You need to have a photo of a baby that you know, maybe your cousin or something like that. And that would make it a lot more relevant, and you can speak about that in your writing a lot more clearly. So all 3 must have clear and very explicit links to the prompt selected. The next thing we'll talk about is to just talk about these prompts more specifically. And these are really already made up higher level knowledge questions. There's no need for you to formulate the knowledge question at all. And they are higher level questions because they are all about knowledge. They are very, very contestable because they're about knowledge. And they draw on TOK concepts. So if you have a look over here on the left, you can see an example of this, and we'll go through some more of these more clearly now. So here are the prompts from the guide. Just cut and paste them out of the guide. So there's 35 of them, and they're a very interesting set of selection. And probably as a student, the hardest thing for you is going to be to choose which one of these you will actually use. So there are things like what counts as a justification for a claim, or how can I distinguish between knowledge, belief, and opinion? Okay, or who owns knowledge? Okay, so these are all very relevant questions to our life right now, and so it should be easy enough for you to link these with your 3 objects well enough. So it's really important here at the bottom to just take a look at this. It's important that you do not modify the prompt in any way. It's been written for you, it's in the guide, and you need to just make sure you are then choosing your 3 objects which you wish to exhibit, and link them clearly to these available prompts. The other thing we need to remember about the exhibition and the prompts in general is that the prompts are going to help the moderators to make sure that the teacher and the moderator are marking the same sort of material. And we need to remember that the essay is all about the areas of knowledge, and so the IA here is the space in which we can work on the optional themes. And we'll talk about the optional themes in a minute. The next thing I'd just like to highlight is that there's a lot of student choice that's going on in the exhibition. So you can choose photographs and objects from around about in your life. You can even have something that you have created before. You wouldn't make something specifically for the exhibition, but you might have created something in the past yourself. Okay, so you can have digital things, physical things. So we've already talked about tweets and posts on social media, etc. But just remember that all of them have to have this real world connection. That needs to be specific. And so a good thing to remember here is that the objects need to exist in a particular time and place. So that might be virtual space, but a particular time and place is going to help you a lot when you're choosing a object. In the new TOK course, there are themes which give us some options, and we must remember that these themes add up to 3/8 of the course, and that this assessment is 33% of your summative assessment for the entire course. So now there's a core theme in the new course called Knowledge in the Knower, and so your exhibition could center around that a little bit, or it could center around one of the optional themes. So at school we will choose 2 of these optional themes. But you are welcome to choose another one if that's more suitable for your interest level and where you want to head with your exhibition. But they range from knowledge and technology, knowledge and politics, knowledge and religion, etc., and indigenous societies. So there's an interesting set of themes here that you can select from. And this might help you actually to narrow down your choice. If you think about a theme first, then you can narrow down your potential of objects. And it can be a starting point. And there's many different ways of approaching this assessment item. So we might call those entry points to this assessment item. So you can enter from any number of different ways, and it's all valid. So you can look at a theme like I just said, and then you can find objects, or alternatively you can begin with objects, and then you can link them to your prompt, and then link them to a theme. There's any number of ways that you can look at it to make a successful exhibition. The other thing you could do is you could take an exploratory approach where you play around with several different prompts until you make your final selection. But remember, you can't have more than one prompt. You have to select one prompt, and your 3 objects must be explicitly linked to that same prompt. Okay, so let's take a look now about how you're going to be assessed. And I've just pulled this out of the actual rubric. So excellent means that you clearly identify the 3 objects and their specific real world contexts. I've already been talking about that. There must be clear links between the 3 objects and the prompt. Okay, so the examiner, the markers, this is what they're going to be looking for. There's a strong justification. Here's the part where it's up to you to really make a strong argument and justify the particular contribution that each individual object makes to the exhibition and to that prompt. So you can do well if you try to make well supported and find appropriate evidence and explicit references to that prompt, and then you should be fine. So here's the actual criterion sheet that you'll be assessed on for your exhibition. And you'll see there's this overarching question at the top. Does the exhibition successfully show how TOK manifests itself in the world around us? So you've got to be constantly thinking about this real world thing. And this should make this whole assessment item very accessible to everyone. These words up here in the 9 to 10 bracket, the excellent bracket, they're the words that I just showed you back here in the excellent area. And it's just important to point out that there's no reference to the AOKs, to the areas of knowledge in the new instrument at all. So nowhere in here in the excellent bracket does it say you have to mention an area of knowledge. You just need well supported and appropriate evidence that's explicitly linked to your prompt and shows links with the prompt and the objects. So that's what we're talking about. The key thing is the relationship. It's also worth looking at down the bottom of the rubric here. So you've got possible characteristics. If you want to get in the top bracket, you need to be convincing and lucid, precise. Okay, you can't be ineffective and just descriptive. You can't just describe things. Okay, you need to link them, and you need to analyze them, and you need to back them up. So we need this focused, relevant, and coherent sort of argument being made. Before we go on and look at some examples of exhibitions, so that you can see how to write this, and we can teach you how to write it, it's a good thing to just remember the course objectives, because by the time you get to the end of TOK, we need you to be, or you need to be, understanding the position that the guide wants you to be in. Okay, and that is that you have started to become critical at examining knowledge questions, that you've able to explore links between knowledge and the world around us. So there's a really good one to be thinking about when you're writing your TOK exhibition. We can explore links between the areas of knowledge. That's not so explicit in the exhibition, but we do need this clear and coherent arguments. Examples of evidence are effectively supported. It'd be really nice here for you to be aware of, and evaluate some of the things and discuss some implications. And you'll see in the example that we'll show you in a minute, that this idea of implications is still very, very important to TOK, because that helps us to actually relate everything to the real world. Okay, let's look at some samples. But just remember that because this is very early on in the life cycle of this guide, these samples, even though they're provided by the IB through the teacher support material, they may not be great examples. So we will need to come back and review this in a year. It's still really worth having a look at this sample though, because we can see some parts of its structure that are important. So we must remember that the prompt always must be stated. Now this person's actually written an introduction, and that's not actually required. You don't really need an introduction, but you can feel free to do an introduction if you want to. And so they've introduced the concept, and then they've talked about the TOK theme that they're going to introduce. So that's really important. You've got that mentioned in here. And then the writer also gives this overall connection between the concept of subtext and connotation throughout this thing. So they're looking at the decorations that are on this, the patterns and that are on the Starbucks cup. So then the writer goes ahead, the student goes ahead and gives strong justification for the selection of this object, how it relates to the prompt, and the challenges of communication that imposes. And because the question actually says what challenges are, or the prompt says what challenges are raised by the dissemination and communication of knowledge. So the student continually comes back to that. And that's good. Now down the bottom here we see a few words that I'd just like to highlight. This idea of using the word suggest, and it really shows a depth of thought here a little bit, and shows that actually it can make a contribution to our understanding about the dissemination of knowledge. Okay, so we've got some level of critical thought going on, and a bit of convincing argument as well about the object and how it can be interpreted, and the impact that this has on a variety of communities. So we look at this student's second piece of work, which is a dictionary, their second object. And we've got actually the examiner's comment here. The piece of work should be judged holistically, they said. It was felt that this example wasn't so great, but overall, between the three examples, this was considered a strong exhibition. So it's important here to just realize that you can talk about the dictionary in one of the other objects, and it can still be, marks can be awarded for it, or credit can be awarded for it. The guide actually says that no connections between the objects is actually needed, but in my reading and some of my colleagues' reading of this, it's nice when students can connect the objects together as well as the prompt. Okay, so once again here we have links to the specific real-world context. Okay, remember that on the marking scheme it's about how TOK manifests itself in the real world, and so when we think about knowledge, these sorts of statements are good. There's very nice links to the prompt and to the other similar objects, and the student keeps making specific and explicit references back to the prompt. The third example that third object this student's chosen is a song, and so it just shows you the wide variety of objects that you can choose. And then they've got a really strong justification for the contribution that this particular song makes, and in disseminating knowledge, and how it uses subtext, etc., to communicate with communities. So once again, we have strong links to the prompt, and we have good justifications, and there's also a nice personal touch in this one, I think, where the student has written about how this impacts on the knower. Okay, so it links back to that core theme again, and there's some compelling insight into the complexities of communication and how they can occur even using very simple techniques. So the last point, this student does, in this yellow section here, make a connection between the dictionary up here and the song. Now, the student does not have to do that, and it's not required, but it does make this one probably a little bit stronger. In most cases, however, it's probably very acceptable to discuss each of the three objects entirely individually, as long as they're linked clearly to the prompt. We'll just quickly look at another one just to show you the variety of objects. So in this one here, the guiding prompt is what constraints are there on the pursuit of knowledge, and there's a like an X-ray image, there's a map of the world, and there's a book. Okay, so you can see that there's a large number of objects that you could choose from. Okay, we'll leave it there for examples. We'll try and show you more examples in class and distribute those to you so you can look at them. I'd just like to show you now, in the actual guide, there's a step-by-step process as well, which is another way of approaching all of this. The guide recommends we spend about 8 hours on this, so it's not that long in terms of teaching, and then students can be working on it as well out of that time. The guide has this summary. You've got step 1, select an IA prompt. You can either select it through a theme or a variety of starting points, as we've mentioned before. Step 2, you can produce. You have to produce a single file containing your 950 words. The title needs to be clearly stated in terms of which prompt you have selected. You are entitled as a student to one full formal draft of your work via the teacher, and so that's a really important step for students to undertake. And then, as I said earlier, samples of student work will be submitted to the IB as for any other subject, so we all know about that process. The last step, of course, for the exhibition is to actually hold an exhibition. We haven't spoken about that yet. There's a number of different ways here. The IB has suggested that the school can make the exhibition anything from being virtual to showing it within the school community. We'll just finish off by quickly talking about authenticity. It's really important that you complete your work on your own, that you make lots of references, and that you submit a draft. This is a dual purpose. The teacher gets to check that it's your work, and you get to justify that it's your work, and you also get to get some feedback. So it's really worthwhile engaging in that process, and then you can avoid any issues of plagiarism. So to finish off, let's just have a look at some mistakes that can be made. You can really cause problems for yourself if you forget to state the real world context of the objects. You really need to think about that. You need to present images that are not, realistic objects that are in the world, not highly generic things, because then you won't be able to find specific instances to talk about. And if you forget to make links with the objects and the prompt, okay, that can cause big problems. And please try not to engage in highly descriptive responses, okay, just describing what the object is. That might be highly interesting, but it's not TOK, so you really need to use your TOK vocabulary. Going under the word count would be a really silly mistake as well, because 950 words is not very much. So, the examiners are going to be realistic. This is only 300 words, so it's not a lot that you've got to work with, so you're going to have to use your words carefully. And so when I say that, I mean that you need to aim for real clarity and precision, and being really careful and explicit in your sentence construction and in the links you make. So I hope that's been helpful, and you've got a bit of an idea now on how to go about preparing and constructing your exhibition. Good luck.